acsportstips.com. This is our Week 5 game analysis of a great matchup in East Lansing between the undefeated Ohio State Buckeyes and the 3-1 Michigan State Spartans. It's a 3:30 game. It's on ABC. It's going to be a great game. First Big Ten matchup for both teams. We'll give you the news and notes about both sides of the ball for the Buckeyes and the Spartans. We'll have a prediction of this game on our website, goforthe2.com. We changed our name. We have a new branding. We love the name. It'll be up on our website Thursday morning, followed by a YouTube podcast on Thursday morning. So check that out. We're going to give you the news and notes right now. So let's get into it. Ohio State is 6-1 in the last 7 matchups at East Lansing. They've dominated the Spartans. Braxton Miller and company pumped up going into this game, so we have to keep an eye out for that. Ohio State has owned Michigan State in the last 7 matchups on the road. Michigan State, you have to look back to 1998 and 1999 for the last time they defeated the Buckeyes in back-to-back seasons. They did beat the Buckeyes last year. How does that carry over this year in terms of their psyche at home? They've struggled to date. We're going to get into that, and we'll talk about it right now. Ohio State and Urban Meyer's crew, they had a dominating victory in Week 1 against Miami of Ohio. Since that time, 3 lackluster efforts against Central Florida, California, and last week against UAB. They've had 4 straight home games, and as the weeks progress, they seem to slip a little bit more and more defensively. How does that carry over as they do face a tight and tough Michigan State offense and defense? So we'll have to see how that carries over on the road at Michigan State. Urban Meyer, his offense is led by the nuts and bolts sophomore quarterback Braxton Miller. He's a Heisman hopeful now. He's brought himself into the mix. He's hitting on all cylinders, both passing and running. He's thrown for 754 yards. He's completed 66% of his passes. He's thrown 7 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He's also added 441 yards rushing, and he has progressed in the vertical passing game. He's made some deep throws, and his touch on his deep passes are what have the Buckeyes sitting at 4-0. He is the nuts and bolts. As Braxton Miller goes, so does the offense. The running game has been slow to get going. Jordan Hall has come back. He did rush for 100 yards last week. They're going to need him against this Michigan State defense. Michigan State's defense is ranked 11th in the country in terms of points against, and this is going to be a very tough matchup for both teams as it's evenly matched game. So offensively for the Buckeyes, and if you're Urban Meyer and company, I think you want to jump out early on the Spartans the way Notre Dame did and force Michigan State out of its comfort zone. Look for a lot of play action early by Braxton Miller and look for deep balls by the Buckeyes to see if they can hit on the sort of suspect Michigan State secondary. If it's one thing that we've broken down over the last 4 weeks with Michigan State is their defensive line and their linebackers are very strong. If they do have a weakness, it's in the secondary. They were exploited by Boise State a little bit. That carried over against Notre Dame. Can Ohio State take advantage of the Michigan State secondary? We have to see. Defensively for Ohio State, you do have some concerns, and we have some concerns about the Ohio State rushing defense, and we think that Urban Meyer and his staff have to solve this problem heading into this matchup. When you look at Ohio State, they dominated Miami of Ohio. They held them to -1 yards rushing in game 1. Since that time, the rushing defenses got considerably worse. Against Central Florida, they gave up 4.5 yards per carry. Against California, they gave up an enormous 5.5. And in the win last week, even against UAB, they allowed 4.2 yards per rush. That cannot happen this week against a strong offensive line and big backs such as Le'Veon Bell. We know what Le'Veon Bell can do, and Mark D'Antonio is going to want to test that will of the Ohio State Buckeye defense, and how do they respond in terms of run support. So I think that's a key question heading into this game for the Buckeyes defensively. Another note for the Buckeyes defensively and as a team, I think Urban Meyer has to be concerned about the penalties per game that his team has acquired, especially even at home. 4 straight home games. Over the last 3 games, the Buckeyes are averaging 9.3 penalties per game for 80 yards. That cannot happen in this ball game against Michigan State. Michigan State has looked lackluster to date, but they are still a strong team, and Urban Meyer cannot afford to give up 9 penalties a game in terms of 80 yards. Otherwise, the Buckeyes will lose. So I think discipline is a key component heading into this game for the Buckeyes, and we'll see how it pans out a little bit later in the week. Let's talk about Michigan State. Michigan State has struggled as well. They haven't looked sharp offensively. As Le'Veon Bell goes, so does that offense. Mark D'Antonio has brought Andrew Maxwell along slowly, but he's been a little slow picking up the offense. He's only completed 56% of his passes for only 3 touchdowns. He does have, though, 3 interceptions. So how does Andrew Maxwell respond in this game is a key question for the Spartans. The Spartans, I think it's very simple. You want to jump out early. You want to use Le'Veon Bell and that running game. If Michigan State does get up to an early lead, look for them to build off the home field advantage in East Lansing and look for them to try and wear down the Buckeyes and see if their run defense has gotten better. I think they're looking for a very low-scoring game. Offensively, Michigan State has struggled. They're only 104th in the nation in terms of scoring offense, only at 21 points a game. They are looking for a low-scoring affair if you're Mark D'Antonio and his offensive staff, and lean on Le'Veon Bell, who had a great game last week. He was the main reason why they beat Eastern Michigan. They struggled last week. Michigan State, they were down for most of that game and came back late. Were they looking ahead against the Buckeyes? Who knows? But they're going to have to get a better effort emotionally, both offensively and defensively, if they're going to beat the Buckeyes, because this is both teams' first Big Ten game. They're going to both want to jump out and get an early win so that can carry over later in the year. And we have to see how both teams respond, for Ohio State on the road and for Michigan State at home with the home crowd. So we'll see how that pans out. Defensively for Michigan State, you want to use your big defensive lineman led by William Golston and try and keep Braxton Miller in the pocket. He can burn you if he gets outside the pocket. He's shown that. He's not just a running quarterback now. He's a sophomore. He's matured. As he gets out of the pocket, he has kept his eyes down the field, especially if you watch that California game. He hit big throws as he broke contain, and that's what has the Buckeyes at 4-0. You're going to want to use some blitz packages and keep Braxton Miller in the pocket, because if he breaks contain, he can beat you with both his legs and his arm now. So that's a key question mark for the Spartans. Can they do it? We'll see as the week progresses a little bit later in the week. So it's going to be a great matchup. A very evenly matched game in our opinion. So check us out. We'll have a prediction in this game a little bit later in the week. www.goforthe2.com.